Perfect. Well, hi, welcome everyone to our webinar on the hiring and retention of youth peer positions. My name is Michelle Vance. I'm a youth program specialist with Youth Move National. I'm located in Oak Harbor, Washington. Been involved with Youth Move National, youth peer support through the Systems of Care and through Healthy Transitions Initiative. Um, I'm a part of Youth Move National now because I just believe in, youth having a voice and being included in systems change work. I'm joined today by Joshua Calorino, and I'll let Joshua introduce himself real quickly.
Thank you very much, Michelle. And as was stated, my name is Joshua Catarino. I go by he, him pronouns, and I work at Youth Move National as a youth programs coordinator now. A lot of my experience revolves around youth peer support, youth advocacy, and generally speaking, all things youth. But more generally speaking, I've done a lot of work in systems change and promotion of positive outcomes, and that has pulled me into the mix with Youth Move National, whose mission and vision is similar to that, right? Just making the world a better place for the individuals that are receiving services. And my work has brought me in contact with Michelle Vance and the rest of the staff team at Youth Move National, and has led me here to be able to facilitate this session here with you all as well. So I'm very excited to be here, and I will return the reins to Michelle.
Thank you. Yeah, and thank you all again for joining us today. We'll go to the next slide now. So a little bit more about Youth Move National. The acronym MOVE stands for Motivating Others Through Voices of Experience. We're an organization that focuses on youth voice and putting that lived experience throughout our work. Youth Move National affects positive change through advocacy, through leadership development, consumer engagement, and systems change initiatives. We provide training, technical assistance, consultation, youth and adult partnerships and trainings. We also work with conferences and meeting planning and delivery for youth. And we do this all on-site and online. So we're really happy to have you all here with us today. We'll go to the next slide. I'm just going to go over our agenda, kind of what we will cover today. So far, we've gone through the welcome introduction of Youth Move National and then the presenters. Next, we're going to cover youth engagement. And then Joshua will take some time to talk about the role of a youth peer and give us some hiring and retention strategies. And then we'll end for about 10 minutes of questions. So if you have any of those, feel free to put them in the chat box or save them till the end, and we'll make sure to address them. So we're going to go to the next slide now. Perfect. So youth engagement is a strategy in which youth are given a meaningful voice and a meaningful role. They are authentically involved in working towards changing the systems that directly affect their lives. It's a real-time feedback process, real-time Q&A, hearing from these folks. That means that the work is going to be youth-guided, it's going to be youth-directed, and at all possible, youth-driven. I'm going to go to the next slide here. So I hope that you all are familiar with this image, and if you're not, it's a great thing to be aware of and to be actively working on. So the image on this slide is an adaptation of Roger Hart's Ladder of Youth Participation. This is a guide on how to meaningfully involve youth and avoid non-engagement practices. So we got a quote here on the slide that says, "A youth-adult partnership is one in which adults work in full and intentional partnership with young people on issues facing and/or programs and policies affecting youth." So you'll see that we have here at Youth Move National separated this out into two sections. Those first three rungs, manipulation, decoration, and tokenism, those are unacceptable forms. We never want to be doing this. This is non-engagement with youth. Ultimately, anyone who is working with youth wants to be at an 8, but anything above a 3 is progress, is great progress that we're excited about. We can all do better to reach that top rung in our work with youth, and I think it's an active process. I will now turn the slides and the time over to Joshua to talk a little bit more.
Thank you very much, Michelle. And I also wanted to take just a touch of time as well to dive a little deeper into the ladder. And I wholeheartedly, right? Like we mentioned, we want to absolutely stay out of those first 3 rungs at all times. We never want to be in there. And like was mentioned, we want to be at an 8. The 8 is the ideal. But I will also add as well is that there are certain times, not every time, most every time we want to be at an 8, but there will be certain times where an 8 for one reason or another will not be possible. And that could be because of funding, because of bylaws, or simply the time that something takes place, et cetera, et cetera. But in every facet that we can be at the 8th rung, that's where we want to be. And from there, we can try and taper it down to a point where it might be, a 6, a 4, a 5, etc. But we always want to aim high when we're doing this. And I see, Chris, that you have your hand raised. Please feel free to speak.
Hi there, this is Kristen Royal, and I work at the Division of Behavioral Health and Recovery and work with many others in partnership with other families and youth around kind of the leadership of the Family Youth System Partner Roundtables. And I think when looking at this ladder, I feel like some regional FYSPRTs have projects that are that would be specifically at number 8 on this ladder of participation. Like the young people are like, this is an idea we have for this, let's do that. And then they kind of move forward with that project, have their meetings implemented, etc. More broadly though, when you look at the Family Youth System Partner Roundtables, I think by design, that is somewhere else on the ladder in the terms that it's family representatives, youth representatives, and system partner representatives kind of all working together and partnering on an equal platform. And that seems like it might fit somewhere else on the ladder, just kind of by nature of that approach, maybe at 6 or somewhere else. So I just wanted to throw that out there, and I was curious about other people's thoughts on that as well, because I think regional FYSPRTs probably have an element of things happening that fall at different places on this ladder, if that makes sense.
I would add that it absolutely does make sense, Chris, and thank you for bringing that up for us. And to Chris's point, right, where do we think we are on this ladder? Had anyone who's maybe had some time to ruminate on that, in your local FYSPRTs, where do you see yourselves on these ladders? Or is it split where some things are maybe rung 8 and other things are less so?
I would concur with that last comment, Joshua. I think at times, I've been a pastor working in youth ministry for 35 plus years. And there are times when, it's really initiated, driven, and led by the youth. And other times it might be still getting kicked around the table with how involved the adults are going to be. So I think there are times where the ladder is very, very clear to me, and other times where the roundtable model, the teens and the youth and the students have not quite got the buy-in fully from the adults who might have been assigned to be with them.
Thank you so much, Herman, for jumping in and sharing that. Very much appreciate it, and you bring great insights. Is there anyone else who wanted to share any thoughts? I do see Rachel Baxter in the chat box saying, I think with my work, it is mostly 6, but the steering committees maybe 7. So, right, so you see that you have certain things at 6, and then you can move it up the ladder into 7. Ideally, all of the work that we're doing, right, the motion that we're taking it in is up the ladder, right? So we're going from 6 to a 7 to an 8, or a 4 to a 5, etc., etc. So happy to hear that, Rachel. Keep up the great work. I see you unmuted. I believe Colleen, did you want to jump in? Oh, might have been an accident. No worries. So, like we mentioned, right, so we want to try and do our best to be at rung 8, but also something that I want to bring up is what has been a bit of, I'll define as faulty logic that might not be exactly right, but that has happened with this ladder is that originally when the ladder was created, it was created with the intent to teach, or rather the intent to start discussions on this topic. And most individuals have taken it and used it as a tool to be used, which is what it is not. This kind of ladder is meant to facilitate discussions similar to the one that we're having now of where are we now and how can we move up the ladder. So keep that in mind if you're going to use this, to use it for that purpose. And if you are looking to have a tool to actually measure what it is you're looking for at Youth Move National, and it is available to you all. We have the YVAL and the YFOC, which are actual assessment tools that do the measuring portion of this work. With all that being said, we did want to move into what a youth peer is, or more specifically, what is a youth peer? So we have a definition on screen, and maybe without reading it, maybe if you have read it, before this definition popped on screen for you, I do want to hear from us. What do we as a collective group believe a youth peer is? What do we know it as, barring the definition you see on the screen?
I hate to be the one always talking about this sermon again, but I definitely concur with what's on the screen, and to say each group that I've been involved in kind of define the youth peer role as their community or group process develops. And I find that if I kind of step back and let them develop that, it turns out to be a little more teamwork initiated.
Thank you for jumping in, and thank you for sharing once more. I mean, very much appreciated. And yes, so if you have any more responses, feel free to drop that in the chat box. But the definition we have on screen reads, young adults, or rather what a youth peer is, young adults, usually between the ages of somewhere around 18 to 29. I will say that depending on where you are, what system of care you're in, etc., that might vary, but generally speaking, 18 to 29, that have a combination of lived and personal experience within systems of care, who can provide support and mentorship for other youth in similar situation. And I would like to put an emphasis on the ideas there of lived and personal experience. What makes a youth peer so important in the system of care is that it is someone who has lived experience actually navigating the systems that the youth themselves, right, the consumers, the youth, are going through. So we can bring what I like to define as a real human element to the work that we're doing. This is not to say that we are discrediting the importance of clinicians and saying that they are less than or anything like that. What it is saying is that the importance of having lived experience, actually going through the system, provides added value to the things that the youth are experiencing. It is one thing to have a clinician, and as it is to have a doctor and things like that, but it is another thing entirely to have someone who, again, to use some colloquialism, gets it. Someone who really just gets it, who understands what the experience is like, and to have gone through something. And that is kind of what marks what a youth peer is. So with that, we do have, and you'll see on the slide deck here on the right-hand side, a few videos that we wanted to share. And while I get that set up, I'm gonna go ahead and stop my screen share. But if anyone wanted to add anything, please feel free now. I don't know if Michelle, you also had something you wanted to add, feel free.
In my work with the state of Utah, as we were setting up, how youth peer support specialists, how the certification would look, what training components we wanted to use. One of the big things is kind of the starting block, I guess, for us was thinking about this as, is this adults who are trained to work with young people, or is this young people who are trained to work with other young people? And as we started to hire people for regional positions within our system of care, we quickly found that there were like 3 buckets of people who often applied for the job. We saw university social work students. They were pretty near our location, so that made sense. We saw people who were quite a bit older, but kind of had that youthful vibe, and I think saw themselves in that light as being able to connect. And then we saw youth, people who were under 29, who were a part of social systems, part of the public social service systems, right? So using some of those Medicaid funded services, who were not actively pursuing a degree in social work. And we found that to be really important, and that the lived experience was just really great. So I thought that that was, I don't know, just an important perspective or thing that I think of when we're talking about the definition and why we kind of seem to belabor the point, is there are places that do hire older folks to do this role, and it's often not very successful. It's not something that we would promote. I think sometimes it's going to happen, right? But if all possible, under the age of 29, and in some cases under the age of 25 too. So I think it's best for whatever population you're working with. And I'll turn it back over to you, Joshua.
Awesome, very much. I'm going to go ahead and get my screen share going for us to watch. Let me know if the audio is functioning. Just give me a thumbs up.
Hi, I'm Taylor. I have a lot going on. I work with a lot of professional people on my team. My therapist and psychiatrist, my foster care caseworker, and my teachers. They're all okay, but sometimes it feels like something is missing. There have been a lot of school meetings because I can't focus with all the stuff happening in my foster home and with court. I talked to my caseworker about it and she seems to understand, but then she starts talking about hearings and motions, whatever that means. My therapist and I talk about it too, but I can only see her in her office for an hour. It seems like everyone is speaking a foreign language at school meetings too. Like, what is an IEP anyway? Everyone asks me what might work for me, but I don't know and I freeze. I wish there was someone who had been through this before that could help me understand what's going on and help my team understand me better too.
Youth peer support providers use the power of relatability. Just kidding. Peer support providers aren't really superhuman, but they can be super helpful. They can talk with you about their lived experiences. Youth peers may give you some ideas or help you advocate for yourself.
Max and I wrote a list of things to try at school. Having Max's help to understand all of their jargony talk made me feel less nervous at my meeting. Having Max on my team now is pretty cool. He gets it because he's been through some of the same things. Besides meeting with me on his own and coming to my meetings, Max helped me find a youth group of other teenagers who are going through some stuff too. Now I don't feel like I'm the only one.
Max helped Taylor increase his knowledge about services being offered to him, inspired a sense of hope for the future, helped expand his social circle, and supported Taylor's ability to have his voice heard.
What if I told
Alrighty. I see Carrie in the chat box asking what is the name of the video, that you love it already. It is a monthly minute for youth peer support made in partnership with SAMHSA and with the TA network. And the links will be available we can send the slides afterwards where you will have the link to the video. And I can also do my best to share it right here in the chat box for us to have. So with that definition that we have of youth peer support, there we go in the chat box for everyone. That is the definition that we are working with. I apologize, I'm doing a couple of things at the same time here. We did have one more video to dive into, and the next video that I'm going to share is going to be more specifically on the youth peer support role definition. And this is moving deeper into the work that we are trying to get in terms of hiring and retention, right, of those youth peer support, of youth peer supporters. And that is to say, when what we have found in terms of youth peer support and what that role means is that there's oftentimes not a clear definition of what that is. And what you'll often get is youth peer supporters who start off maybe for the first week as a youth peer and then roll into a bit of a case manager or roll into a bit of a therapist. So we really want to embed a deep understanding of very specifically what youth peer support in particular is. So with that being said, we're going to roll into that peer support role definition, or rather more specifically, effective support for youth peer providers. So let me get that started for you. Here it is.
Hi, I'm Max, and I'm a youth peer provider. Youth peer providers offer support to young adults who are struggling with mental health challenges. We use our personal experiences in the mental health system to empathize and connect with them, and then we walk with them on their journey to wellness with all of its ups and downs. I love my role. It can be both rewarding and challenging. To help with the challenging aspects of being a youth peer provider, I meet with a supervisor once a week. My supervisor's name is Kat, and she is a huge support. Part of Kat's job is to make sure all of the reporting and paperwork gets done, though administrative work is just a small piece of her role. Sometimes I struggle to make mutual and meaningful connections with the youth I'm trying to support. Kat helps me reflect on why I might be struggling and encourages me to look at how I'm communicating, listening, and sharing parts of my story so I can focus on creating better connections with the youth I'm supporting. Kat also understands that it would be hard for me to help other youth if I didn't focus on my own needs and wellness. During our weekly meetings, we take time to work on my self-care plan. So you can see, Kat is so much more than a supervisor. She is a mentor and a coach too. It can be difficult working as a youth peer provider because I'm working with youth going through similar life experiences as my own. It can be especially difficult to stay in my work role when a youth I'm supporting has a similar lived experience to me. Sometimes, when I'm struggling with supporting a youth or having issues with my own wellness, it can be uncomfortable to bring these issues up to Kat. To help, our organization supports myself and other youth peer providers by hosting a monthly meeting just for us. This provides time and space where we can talk with each other to explore, support, and learn from each other's struggles or successes. We can brainstorm and share experiences in a safe space, which can help me decide how to bring issues to Kat's attention. Our organization truly values what lived experience brings to the work, provides ongoing training to myself and other peers, and has a great wellness culture. We are all in it together, helping to take care of each other as we all work to support youth and young adults. Providing peer support is such a fulfilling role for me. Having the support of fellow peers, a supervisor who just gets it, and the organization as a whole makes it so much sweeter. Please.
All righty. Oh. All right. Thank you everyone for your time and for your attention. So what we're going to go ahead and do is get these slides back up for you. Apologize that this is never as smooth as I want it to be. So we have a definition of youth peer support. Here we go. There we go. So with those definitions in mind, we wanted to roll into a discussion more specifically around maintaining and identifying ways to reach out to youth. And let's look at the slides on this one. Okay, so in this work that we're doing, it is important to find ways to engage youth properly. And a really great way to go ahead and do that is through youth peer support, which is one facet or one avenue that you can take towards that end. I would say there's a couple of things one should keep in mind when you're reaching out to youth. We want to make sure that the language that we're using is language that is easy to understand. When we talk about relatability, that is really important. So we want to use language that is not against youth, right? So something simple that I hear a lot in the general zeitgeist and the work that we're doing is oftentimes people will refer to the youth as kids or kiddos. And while not entirely bad, it can sometimes, how I felt when I was youth, be a little demeaning in terms of the experience that we had had. So we want to try and do our best to work with youth and engage youth in ways that make them feel like their own independent and autonomous being, right? Our youth, our young adults is what we want to try and reach out on. So to that end, I did want to invite Chris into the space. I'm so sorry, Chris. I'm seeing some messages on our end. Did you want to jump in and provide some further context right now?
Well, I was thinking for like regional FYSPRTs and FYSPRTs that they may have some youth peers that are attending their regional FYSPRT meetings to share their lived experience, but the region or the family youth system partner roundtables don't necessarily provide services. They're not a service providing organization. The FYSPRTs are really kind of set up to have a place where families and youth and system partners can talk about kind of what's happening in their regions. And so it's a place for families and youth to share their lived experiences and kind of what need areas may be coming up in the region, and then work in collaboration with each other, the families, youth, and system partners, to address those needs or brainstorm around those needs. So there very easily could be youth peers attending the regional FYSPRTs, but there also may be young people that are attending the FYSPRT meetings that have that lived experience that you described in the definition of youth peers, but they haven't necessarily gone through the certification to become a youth peer, and they're not necessarily working as youth peers. And so just kind of wanted to share that to kind of broaden it a little bit, that that FYSPRTs focus, I would say, probably more on kind of bringing that lived experience voice to the table, and maybe less on hiring and retention of youth peers. But youth peers aren't excluded from FYSPRT. In fact, there's many youth peers that participate in the regional FYSPRTs and that are even, you know, that are tri-leads, youth tri-leads in some of the regions as well. So yeah, just kind of wanted to jump in with that kind of expanded view.
Yeah, no, absolutely love and appreciate that. And Michelle, I see that your hand is raised. Go ahead.
Yeah, so I think it would probably be great at this point in the discussion to talk more about, you know, bringing youth advocates to the table and people who are not necessarily youth support specialists, but are there as change makers and as, you know, representatives of youth voice. So that's something I think that we talk a lot about, engagement strategies for youth advocates. Obviously, at the top of the list for that, what we've learned is food, and also helping to subsidize or make it so everyone at the table is being paid, right? So in my work in the past, we saw youth being invited to the table, but not being paid while all the professionals were. So you want to make sure that there's some kind of incentivization, whether it's stipends, whether it's making sure that their transportation is paid for. Looks a little bit different, right, online and on Zoom. But I think the reason, right, that people attend is very important. And you want to stop and listen as youth come in the door, as they get involved in the beginning. What has brought you here? Why are you here? And you kind of want to make sure that that's included. And if they have expectations that are not going to fit the group and fit the work that you're in, be someone that connects them, right, to a different group that's going to fit. But make sure that your real, you know, the expectations in the work is clearly conveyed to them, right? I think that as professionals and adults, we expect that, but youth can sometimes be an afterthought for those things. In my work, I've found it very effective to hold a pre-meeting and a post meeting with youth when I'm asking them to join a room full of professionals. This is really great, especially when I have a personal connection to those youth. And it covers, things in the agenda, talking about particular ways that they can add their voice in without being distractive, right? We want to be someone that adds to the group and the benefit of the work being done. So those are a couple things that just come off the top of my head when we're talking about engaging youth kind of at the community level.
Thank you for jumping in, Michelle. And something else that I would go ahead and add is that engaging youth can tend to be difficult, right? Reaching out to youth, and then, right, once you get the youth and they're in the room, how do I keep them here? How do I keep them coming back? So there are a couple of things I would add to that. One of the best ways to reach out to youth is to meet them where they are. It is one thing to expect youth to show up at your agency, and maybe they might do that. But the best thing that I have found is to go to where the youth are already at. So if there are other youth groups, right, other places where youth are already gathering, how can you get your foot in the door there? How can you make partnerships there with those people in your community to then team up or speak to the youth that are there and invite them into your space, right? And then once they're there, once they're in your doors, there are a number of things that we really need to do. So maintain that engagement starts, I think, at first with having the meetings be of value. So Michelle mentioned earlier the ideas of we want to provide stipends or food, et cetera, et cetera. All of that is really important. But I have also in the past myself run into the issue of once funding dries up, or that can't be provided, the youth then disengage, right? They don't want to show up anymore. And I think that's what happens when the meetings themselves aren't of value. So whatever gift cards, stipends, food that we're providing needs to coincide with the value of the meetings that we're having. And to provide an insight into what I mean by that is back when I was just a youth, right? Before I started to work and do all of these things, when I showed up at my local youth move chapter, which is not too dissimilar from the FYSPRTs, one of the first things that the youth coordinator did was, after greeting everyone and saying hello to all the adults and all that, they took us and she walked us all the way across the building into a separate room with a flip chart paper right on the wall. And she asked us, what would you like to see happen here? What are the things that I can do as a youth coordinator that you want to see here? And we listed all of the things that we wanted. We want this, we want this, we want this. And then Sierra, was her name, went from there to embed those things into the work that we're doing. And I did a couple of things. One, we were able to speak and share, which was a mind-blowing moment for me as a youth. But also, I as a youth was building something. I could go to my friends and say, not only are these cool things happening here, but these were all of my ideas that I embedded. So I began to invite my own friends to come. And that's another thing you want to capture, word of mouth. The youth who are at your doors, we want them to invite the youth that they know, and those youth to invite the youth that they know as well. We want to get as many people in the community to know our names. So just for that one time where they might show up as a youth, they might show up. And that's exactly how I joined. It was an offhanded comment that my friend Anna said at lunch, and I ended up at Youth Move. And then from Youth Move Miami, the local chapter, and from there, you see where I am now. So it's important to include buy-in from the youth. Again, we want that relatability piece. And one tool we can use is youth peer supporters. But another tool we can use is making sure that youth voice is embedded into the programming that we are having. Ask the youth, what would you like to see here? What can I do for you? And those small things provide some more buy-in. And I see Michelle in the chat box saying, first showed up to a youth advisory board meeting when they were 18 because pizza, right? And kept coming back because I was genuinely listened to. Open and honest communication with your youth is so important. If you can genuinely speak with youth and say, hey, listen, we're not doing, we're having some struggles engaging youth right now. Can you tell us why that might be? Is there anything that we're not doing so well that we could be doing better? And listen to them and take their feedback. I did want to leave just a bit of time here for just some questions on this topic, if anyone had any. Okay. All right. If we don't, I did want to provide a bit of an example of what that can look like, of what buy-in can do, and what keeps youth coming back. So one of the issues one of the things that we did back at Youth Move Miami was we had an advisory board, or a youth advisory board more specifically, or rather an executive committee. And it was, what we created were things that were built by youth, right? That feedback loop that we mentioned. We built it by youth, and then it was delivered to youth. So I, as a vice president, planned our general meetings for the youth to go by with topics that I heard from my friend Laura and Jane and John and all of these people. And one day during one of our general meetings, we had a bit of an issue. And the issue was that the services that were being received within that system of care grant that we had weren't going so well with clinicians. And instead of just letting that go, we stepped into that. Wait, what's happening? We want to hear more about that. What's going on? And we found out that these youth were essentially having horror stories with some of the clinical services that they were receiving. So then we took it a step further. All right, how can we use this and embed this into the work that we're doing? How do you want to let people know what's going on? The youth decided on a video. Okay, what kind of video do you want that to be? Do you want it to be funny, serious, blah, 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 etc.? And as that kind of questioning went on, we actually ended up creating a campaign, a social media campaign, completely done by the youth themselves, completely edited, scripted, everything by the youth, entirely driven by them. And then we presented that video to the program and evaluation subcommittee meetings of the local system of care grants. And that then turned into changes to the very grant itself. And that was a huge moment for the youth. So when we talk about the ladder of youth engagement, that's rung 8. And being at that rung makes youth really want to show up and be there at the services or at the offerings that you have. Go ahead, Michelle.
Yeah, I just wanted to share another example of change in youth engagement. So we had a couple of youth with lived experience in the foster care system start to join our statewide system of care meetings. And I think that sounds really similar to the council structure that you all are working on. And I think the significance of this story and why it continues to stand out for me is because of what I see as it really being on that rung 8. So we had these young adults, not yet 18, involved in the council, coming every month, mostly for the food, but they, had some great contributions. Our executive director of the Department of Human Services took some time to just have lunch with these 2 youth. We prepped them, right, to make sure that they came with a bit of an agenda as youth advocates. They got to have lunch with her, meet kind of open-ended, and she really listened to them. This further, I think, just got them engaged, but it also gave them room to bring their own issues to the table. And the issue that they brought was, hey, we're still using trash bags in the foster care system. This makes us feel like trash. Can we change this? Is there a way you, the executive director, can make this harm stop happening? And the next day, that was mitigated. That was something that the executive director took upon herself to change, right? So that idea came from many young adults within our TAL councils in Utah, but it was really propelled and then shared because of that open space. So I think it's just a really great example of kind of leaving some room for the youth to initiate, for the youth to bring their own ideas to the table, and then just a really great way to engage them in a really human manner.
Thank you for jumping in and sharing, Michelle. So to bring this back to the top for a second here, the best thing that you can do as individuals to try and tailor your messaging and increase recruitment, quite simply, is to, as best as you can, have the youth do it. Ask the youth, what do you want to see here? If you were to see this flyer, would you show up here? No. What edits should we make? Could we make? What edits in language? Things like that. Nothing about us without us is what's really important. At every level, we want to involve youth decision making. And when the youth are building this programming and they're a part of this programming and they're making this programming happen, other youth want to be there. That is what incited me to join my local youth group. Is I showed up strictly to be there for a salsa class. But what kept me coming was that the salsa class was facilitated not by some adult, it was facilitated by one of the members of the chapter, by Miguel, who I still know to this day as a friend of mine. And that was a really good moment. So ask yourselves the question when you're doing this, how can I embed some more youth voice in this? How can I get some more youth to join in on this process? Those kinds of things will increase that recruiting and increase that retention, and also increase creativity. Youth have tons of ideas that you yourselves as individuals who are maybe working on the day-to-day don't actually think about. And we should try and embed into that. And no worries, Carrie, thank you very much for being here. So, with that, ask yourselves a question, how can I embed more youth? And make actionable steps to make that accountable. Start a youth advisory board to hear from youth. Hire youth if you can do that. Provide stipends for their work. Create an executive committee like I had back at my local chapter. Little things like that to embed more youth voice. And as promised, we did want to leave some time for some questions. So I don't know if anyone in the group right now has any comments or questions. Chris, maybe you have a question. Please let us know. The time is yours.
Well, this is Chris. I'm kind of wondering, and I think I mentioned this when we were looking at the Hearts Ladder, that that there are regional FYSPRTs that the families, youth, and system partners are working together. But within many of the FYSPRTs, they have kind of youth-led kind of youth programs that are attached or connected to the statewide or to the regional FYSPRT, sorry, which is probably more at number 8 on that rung of the ladder. So I'm wondering if you have some other examples of like the number 6, and I'm sorry, I don't remember the exact language from the ladder, but I think it was adult and youth partnerships, and kind of, was it shared decision making? So I'm wondering if you have some examples from that perspective of the ladder around kind of engaging and retaining youth. I think a lot of what you already described, fits into 8, but I feel like that fits into 6 as well. But wasn't sure if you had any other kind of examples of kind of that shared decision making with youth, like as regional FYSPRTs are developing their work plans and doing needs assessments and things of that nature, like what that might look like in terms of that shared decision making.
Absolutely. One thing I wanted, so you mentioned like the difference between, say, rung 8 there and rung 6. And the difference is, right, it says youth initiated versus adults initiated. So to provide an example of what that might look like is the adults step into the room and they say, all right, so we've decided to have a block party on July 18th. This is the plan that we have. Do you, the youth, do you want to make any decisions around this block party? So you see how there's a difference there, and sure, the youth have voice, around the block party, but the decision has already been initiated, right? It's already been started. The youth have already are working with essentially a lower level of power, so to speak, around that. Versus something that's youth initiated would be the youth being in there and the youth say, listen, kind of like what I mentioned earlier, is we would like to make a video about the issues that we're having with this system. And then as the adult, I said, all right, what would that look like? What should that be, right? And we now are collaborating in a different way to that end. And go ahead, I see, Michelle, you have your hand raised.
Oh yeah, I was just so I have been at 4 before, right? So assigned but informed. And as a youth coordinator, I've also been there too. And how I really viewed the ladder and moving up is what is different from the one below it. So I see number 6, where it's adult initiated, shared decisions with youth. To me, that means that there's room for no. That means that even if a youth disagrees or if there's some pushback, it doesn't just go through, right? And I think that that's the difference between 5 and 6 is you're consulting them, you're informing them, but ultimately the power, the control, the ultimate decision lies just with the adults. When you move over to where it's adult initiated, but those shared decisions, it means that the decision was made together. I think that that can be hard to do without a little bit of education or professional development for some folks. So people are going to come in with different knowledge of the work, of the public policy process, of the advocacy process, and their role. I think that sometimes it's like, well, who is that on, right? Because that's not exactly a part of anyone's job descriptions typically, but someone has to do it, right? So you're starting a new role. You have to have some type of orientation to that work. And I think that that's really crucial for the youth to have and for them to understand that they can say no, that they can give pushback, but also I think how to properly do that in a professional meeting. That can be something that is uncomfortable experience for youth, right? When they join and they're either too enthusiastic, they have not had a lot of professional experience. So I think that some of that orientation is, these are the expectations. These are what we hope for you. And also, you know, leaving some of the room for youth to bring their own ideas, right, to the table. But again, as relevant it is to the work.
Thank you for jumping in and sharing. And to provide even further examples, and I can drop the link to this right in the chat box. I believe you should see on screen a different hearts ladder. And you'll see that this one comes with, let me see, I have to actually can annotate this. I'm sorry, it might be a little small, apologize for that. But at every rung, it provides a general description and then a proper example. So for the rung that you were mentioning, Chris, right, adult initiated with shared decisions, that the adults have an initial idea and young people are involved in making decision, planning, and implementing the project. An example would be a community coordinator asks young people for event ideas for Youth Week. The young people suggest having a skating event and the coordinator and young people work together to make decisions. Versus rung 8, where the young people have the ideas, set up the project, and then invite adults. And the example being, young people decided to need a one-stop shop in their community, and they partner with adults in different youth organizations together to lobby for government resources. So you could see how they're similar and they're both good, but how one is that the young people have now generated this idea. And that kind of thinking and processing brings more buy-in for youth because, of course, like I mentioned, they said, I did this. I was a part of this. I helped bring this one-stop shop into being. And that kind of provides more buy-in, if that makes sense. Does that answer your question, Chris?
Yeah, I think this all makes tons of sense. And I'm curious to what other people on the call think as well, in the sense that I don't think young people got together and said, let's have regional FYSPRT meetings. Like, I don't think I don't know that that was specifically youth initiated. I feel like that was more adult initiated, right? Based on a lawsuit and based on reading system of care values and the work that we were doing. And so my perspective, when I look at the ladder, is to me that FYSPRT fits on round 6, because the idea to have FYSPRTs, I feel like, didn't necessarily come from youth, or it came from youth. It came from youth that were involved in the work 10 years ago that may or may not still be involved in the work. However, like the intent of the FYSPRT and kind of the day-to-day operations, right, and doing their, like, creating their work plan and what they want to focus on in the next couple of years, really is a way and a place for there to be shared decision making from families, youth, and system partners that are a part of that meeting, and being able to have a voice and saying, yeah, this is what I think we should be focusing on in the next year, or no, I think this is more of a priority than that. Or so families and youth and system partners all have that dialogue together. So I feel like I'm rambling a bit, but I do think that FYSPRTs are like between like 6, 7, and 8, based on just how the regional FYSPRT is set up, but also because there is potential within those regional FYSPRTs for youth-led, youth-directed ideas, youth-directed projects, et cetera, et cetera. So I'll stop. I feel like I'm talking a lot onto myself.
Oh, thank you, Chris. Go ahead, Michelle.
I was just thinking this might be a good idea to suggest our why val, why voc for you all. I'm not sure if we've talked about this before, but that is a way to get that real-time feedback from the youth and from those involved on the councils to see where are we really at. So the why voc stands for youth voice on councils, and then the why val is the youth voice at an agency level. And so those are some things that we can follow up about if you guys are interested to do those in your FYSPR council, or just with the work at large, to see, are the youth feeling the same way you guys are? Do you guys all see yourselves at the 6, 7, and 8, and make maybe just some room for them to add some feedback on that?
Thank you for jumping in, Michelle. And there's something actionable within our last couple minutes here that we can do is, if right now in your FYSPRTs you have just one youth, maybe just one, invite them into the space, into a decision-making space, provide them with all the knowledge that they'll need. So we don't just invite you to this space, that's not equitable. Invite them into the space and say, here's the information, here's our bylaws, here's what we want to do, here's our ability to do that, et cetera, all the information they need. And do at least one suggestion that they make, embed it into your system, and bring that back to them and let them know the change that you made. That will instantly increase buy-in. Let's say you don't have one youth, maybe you have none. If you need to find some youth, like I mentioned a little earlier, meet them where they are. Find the local partner that engages youth. Find out where the youth are hanging out, where they're going to be. Go into those spaces as guest speakers with some flyers, wherever that might be, and invite them into your space. And again, meet them open and honestly, saying, we really would love to have some of your feedback. We really would love to see you there for you. And worst comes to worst, maybe they can have some pizza. But sometimes it's those small things that start us, and then building up from there that really make this work happen. So we can start off very small, and we want to build the youth slowly into their own leadership potential. That's how I started. It was just with some salsa classes. And since then, I have grown into this position where I'm able to facilitate and speak with you all right now. With that, we very much appreciate your time, your patience, and just your honesty here in this space with us. I can stay on for a few minutes if you have any questions, but at this point, everyone is free to go. Thank you very much for being here.
Thank you.
Thank you.